Formula One philosophy is back with Nick's News. Nick's News number 3. This is going to be a short episode because I'm just going to talk about all the things I missed while I was away and give a quick recap of the things Sean was so eloquently talking about while I was in Europe, in Italy and Greece. Had a wonderful time. Missed 2 decent races. Kind of upset about that, but hey, made up for it with some wonderful traveling, wonderful vacation, wonderful time with my girlfriend. And you can't watch every race every year. It's kind of hard. 24 races. I should only be obligated to watch 19. Let's be honest. But anyways, as always, Formula One Philosophy. You can catch us on YouTube at F1 Philosophy, F1_Philosophy at Instagram, and F1PhilosophyPod at gmail.com to join our 2024 F1 Fantasy League. It's probably too late to join it now, but hey, if you want to come in for 6 races, why not? Anyways, there's not much to talk about today, like I said. But I think one of the big pieces of news that happened while I was in Europe was Adrian Newey went to Aston Martin. Now, I think Sean would be the better person to talk about this. But at the same time, I think I can give a decent opinion because, yeah, Sean's the engineer. Sean understands what's probably going to happen in Aston Martin a little bit better than I will. But, you know, I still see things. I still see trends. And the trend I'm seeing with Newey is that I think it's a huge, huge mistake for both parties. Newey especially because I don't think he's going to get what he thinks he's going to get out of it. Sean talked about very well that the Honda partnership with Aston Martin in 2026 seems to be the, shall we say, I guess the catalyst or the tipping point for Newey to want to join Aston. Because his experience with Honda and Red Bull led to a great championship in 2021. And that great championship and that great slowly developing car in Honda, when everyone had given up on it after their horrible experience with McLaren, and Adrian Newey took over and retrofitted it to the Red Bull, is probably what he thinks he's going to get again. He's going to strike lightning in the bottle twice. And he may. And from Adrian Newey's perspective, I'm only calling it a mistake because I think in the case of Red Bull, you had Max Verstappen and Daniel Ricciardo and Alex Albon and Pierre Gasly. People, like in the case of Albon and Max, you have 2 clear examples of guys who can develop cars. Albon to a much, much, much lesser extent than what we're seeing at Williams. But Max is one of the best. They've retrofitted that Red Bull to his needs, to his style, to what benefits him. As you can see in the case at the time when Ricciardo was still there, and then now with Perez, Max is still getting seconds, podiums, and Perez can barely finish 10th. And I bring that up just to say you don't get that with Fernando Alonso and Lance Stroll. You get something like we've talked about a million times on this show. You get a kid who's made no benefit now in 4 years at the team. 2 with Sebastian Vettel and now 2 with Fernando Alonso. And in 4 years, his input has never mattered for much. Because as we can tell, from 2021 and 2022, Vettel was doing all the heavy lifting there, development-wise, and growing that car. And Vettel was also doing the heavy lifting in points and results. And say whatever you want, Austin, that Lance has all this potential, and he may, and he did at one point in time in his career. But he seems to be done. So you're wasting a seat and a great car already on that driver. When the car was great last year, he didn't exactly light up the world. And the car was definitely amazing at the beginning of 2023. Way better than I think the results showed. Like, I think to the point, I think the car could have done even better if there wasn't Fernando Alonso in that car. For Fernando saying he brought the most out of the car, I don't think so. He's 40-something years old now. He's not as sharp as he used to be, as much as they can say he's still living up to that potential. He's not as sharp. He's not as motivated as much as he may say he is. Vettel did all the heavy lifting. I got a little off sidetrack there. But Vettel did all the heavy lifting in 2021, 2022. Lance didn't. And now Fernando's here, takes over Vettel's car, does decent with it the first little while, and then turns around and watches development go backwards. And nobody's blaming him for it, and they should. But that should be a sign to Newey that you don't have two good muses in your car. You have a kid who's doesn't even seem to care if he's in F1 or not. He's just on the ride with daddy, who has all the business acumen and all the goals and the dreams and desires, and he's just putting that caboose on that train. And you have Fernando Alonso, who, as Sean greatly pointed out one time, doesn't know exactly what he's looking for in the car. That excellent interview with his old engineer at Renault, and he says, we fixed the car and did all the things Fernando asked us to do. And Fernando says, the car's worse, I just drove it better. So, what is Newey looking for? You're not driving the car, Adrian. You're building a car for two drivers, both of which aren't at the peak of their career anymore. And both of which don't know how to fix it if they run into problems. So basically, you've signed a 5-year contract, and it looks like at least the first 2 is going to be wasted on these two drivers. And they're going to probably have to either start all over or hope you get someone who can take that work and finally show its true potential. Because Fernando's going to be what? He's going to be probably 40, close to 45 by the time 2026 rolls around. Yeah, 45 or 44. He's not going to be that good, even if you develop a great car. The great cars you developed for in the past didn't work out for Senna. Did work out for Hill, Villeneuve, young guys. Did work out for Hakkinen, young. Coulthard, young. But as they got older, Raikkonen, young. As they got older, the development fell off. And even you weren't infallible. Even you couldn't always develop the perfect car. You did great things with Vettel. Great things. But then it took a while to win again, didn't it? Because not everybody is going to have that ability. So you're trying to find this Red Bull combination again without the driver. Like I said, you're trying to find lightning in a bottle twice, 18 years on, without the drivers to do it. It's the hope, I imagine. I think you went there in the hope that you would have the ability to develop a good car and then hope that someone will bring out the best of it. And I don't know why you seem to buy the bullshit that that's Fernando Alonso, but it's probably going to be someone else other than him. The mistake you made is thinking that Fernando was the selling point. Otherwise, I think he will do a pretty good job there. From Aston Martin's perspective, it's the same thing, right? The mistake is you have the drivers. You've maximized everything you could, but you're still going to have to now turn around and buy a driver that's competent. So Aston Martin made the mistake in re-signing Alonso and Stroll, and I guess we were stuck with Stroll. We're stuck, but you weren't stuck with Alonso, were you? So it seems like an odd fit, and it seems like an odd choice. Austin obviously didn't make a mistake. That was just a facetious and tongue-in-cheek remark. They got the best they could. But why Newey seems to think that this is the right combination, I don't know. But we'll see. I don't want to talk too much about it because Sean already hashed it out pretty well. That's just my original thought when I saw that. I said, it's not what you think it's going to be, Adrian. It's not going to be that easy. And your reputation, if it takes a hit at the end of your career, there's no going back from that. We're going to look back like as I just did and say, hey, there were periods of time where you didn't always do the best job. And they will scrutinize you for that. And they'll wonder what happened. You'll still go down as one of the best, but maybe not the best. Because people forget about Ross Brawn, who has just as many game-changing seasons as you. I also just want to point out, too, that Adrian Newey has gone to work now with the new news that has come out that Sergio Perez has outlined the problem since Spain 2023. Adrian Newey went to work for another year before he went on his guardian leave from that point. So the Red Bull problems are partly on him. And maybe, yeah, he's already been stepping back a lot. Maybe he hasn't been as hands-on as before. But the idea that he just always knocks it out of the park needs to be challenged. And I'm okay to be that guy. I'm okay to be the one that points out that, hey, he's not a quick fix for anybody. Sometimes you get it wrong, even the best of us. And he could get it wrong here. So I hope he gets it right for his reputation, because he's going to need it. Because Fernando and Lance, this is my final thought on it. Fernando and Lance are going to ruin whatever Adrian Newey brings about to them. Especially Fernando. I think a lot of people are going to be surprised at how poor of a job he really can do. And not enough people remember, like, all the stuff we've talked about in the past about just how overrated Fernando is. Anyways, Baku. That was the other thing I wanted to talk about today. There were all some great points. Sean did an excellent recap with producer Gatsby. My original thoughts, obviously the big one was the Sainz versus Perez crash. I just saw the highlights, everybody. I wasn't able to watch the race, like I said, on vacation. Couldn't get around to it. Have no regrets, because I was definitely at a beach or sipping a cocktail on the beach somewhere or on a beautiful mountaintop. So if you're upset that I'm making these comments based on highlights, go fuck yourself. Okay. My original thoughts on the Perez and Sainz contact was that it was completely Sainz's fault. That was my original thought. It looked like Sainz just drifted into him, wasn't really paying attention. And even my original thought was, Sainz just took him out to help Leclerc, which, as Sean and I have outlined in the past, that's ridiculous. Sainz does not want to do any favors for Ferrari, especially this last season after what they did to him, especially considering he's probably still better than Charles Leclerc. So yeah, I immediately knocked that theory off. But that was my original thought, that was completely Sainz's fault. Perez was just going on his line, and next thing you know, he's in the wall because he's being crushed by Sainz. Sean brought up a fair point, though. And this is why I love this podcast, is that I'm able to listen to two sides and listen to someone with an understanding of how this racing works and digest it and think about it and think, Sean does make a good point. Perez should have paid more attention. You can't just fit the car in if it's not going to go there. Yes, Sainz is being naughty. Yes, Sainz is being bad. But you lost the position the corner before. You open the door for him, and then he can defend any way he wants. And it's a shame. It's probably best that it goes down as a racing incident, when you can also either say it was neither fault, like Jordan says, or it's both of their faults, like some people say. I just want to also play devil's advocate with myself and Sean. If that's not Carlos's fault, then it's not Max's fault at Austria, where the same thing happened. Orlando tried to squeeze in on the outside, should have probably braked before sending it when you could have got Verstappen in a couple corners later and not try to force it. And then you knock both cars out, or just yourself out while Verstappen still finished the race. So that's all I'm going to bring up. It's a good point, too. Like, why are we all over Max's case for doing the same thing that Carlos did? Is because Max is the better driver? He should be more responsible? There was more on the line? I don't know. It's the same type of incident. Especially Max was going into a slow corner. And yeah, he was being a little naughty. But so was Carlos. And if Carlos wasn't being naughty and he just wasn't paying attention, then he's a moron. And he deserves the majority of the blame. So just chew on that, everybody. We can look at this a lot of ways. I tend to agree with Sean on this. But it's something to think about. The other big news from Baku was Oscar Piastri. Of course, pulling off an amazing pass to win the race, showing class, setting the pace, getting ahead of Leclerc, who was obviously on a good weekend, but still not good enough. I'd like to point out that before I went on vacation, I said Charles Leclerc is very good at finishing second, and he is. When second is available, he will get it. He will not win the race unless it's a fluke. So, yeah, that was proven right, but kudos to Oscar. If you listen to our last philosophy together, that's up now, you will hear us talk about Oscar versus Lando and how great we think Oscar is, and that Lando should be very antsy and very anxious about trying to win 2024, because there's a good chance Oscar could win 2025 if he keeps developing on this pace. Yeah, the car is good. Yeah, the car is making it easier for him right now, but you could say the same about Lando. Lando's only is car dependent. So if that's going to be the best car going in 2025, the two of them are going to be fighting for the championship. And Oscar seems to have a cooler head. And he seems to do the more impressive wins, to be quite frank. Yes, Norris runs away with some of them like he did in Zandvoort and what we saw in Singapore. Yeah, he runs away with it, has a great weekend. Almost fucks up in Singapore. Got a little arrogant in Zandvoort at the end of the race. And Miami, yeah, he finally pulled it off after how many opportunities at the front and how many sprint poles, blowing the first corner. There just seems something shaky about him. So Oscar's coming out party, I think, was definitely Baku, where he showed, I can be just as good as you. I'm not a kid anymore. I'm not a developing racer. I'm here. And Sean and I talk about that more in the last episode. The other news was Colapinto finishing 8th. Not much else to say. It was pretty decent. It was pretty impressive. You got to be in it to get those points. As Jordan and Coulthard said, there was an excellent interview with Mark Webber, which I'm about to reference for somebody else, where Mark Webber talks about getting lucky in those instances, and Jordan comes back at him and says, you make your own luck. You make your own luck. You get your lucky situations by being good. And there's credence to that. And we should give Colapinto some praise for this. I definitely am. Sean and I have been rooting for him from the beginning. We think he's in a shitty situation. We think he shouldn't have been thrown into Williams like this when it made no sense for him, no sense for Williams. And then where does he go at the end of the year, even if he does good? And everybody's worshiping his performances already. I just like to remind everybody it was a second last lap double DNF that put him into 8th. Otherwise, he would have finished 10th. And drivers who come in and finish 10th early on have not fared that well in the past. Zhou Guanyu, Yuki Tsunoda are the last two. Let's not get overhyped on this kid. Let's not start going insane and start saying, I just watched an interview with The Race today, where 3 guys were talking about it, and they said, based on the performances in the last 3 races, Franco Colapinto should absolutely be in that Sauber seat. And it's like, his performances are okay. A 12th in Monza, yeah, it was solid. Sean pointed out he didn't crash and destroy his car in qualifying. Still out in Q1. Worked his way out to 12th. He's already on par with Sargent, and I think, like Sean and I agreed, anybody's better than Sargent. Just because Sargent was that bad doesn't mean someone who eclipses him deserves to go everywhere. Deserves the royalty treatment. It was a 12th. Then, realistically, it was a 10th in Baku. Okay, we'll call it an 8th. It's still not that special. It's a double DNF second last lap under the safety car. Impressive, solid performance. Not a superstar just yet. And then 11th in Singapore, Albon DNF'd. And they say, yeah, Colapinto took a cheeky pass at the start. Yeah, you would never see Sargent do that because Sargent doesn't have that ability, but it doesn't mean Colapinto is suddenly amazing. It means he took his chances. And good for him. Like I said, I'm in this weird situation with him where I want to root for him. I want to say, Williams is stupid for doing what they did, but at the same time, I don't want to get caught up in the hype. I don't want to push a kid into another position that's just going to fuck him over when he should have had a normal trajectory into F1 because he was a very average F2 driver. Just because he was given a chance and he's doing all right, better than Sargent, doesn't mean we worship him. Stop giving some drivers low expectations, and if they barely exceed them, treating it like it's a championship. And then putting high expectations on others, like I'm going to talk about later, and when they miss those high expectations, destroying them. When really, you were better off with the guy you put the high expectations on. I think you all know who I'm talking about. But I'm going to get to that later. Anyways, I want to see what Colapinto does the rest of the season. If he gets better, I might shut up. I might join the hype. But I just don't think we should overinflate this just yet. Albon still has outscored him in that same point in time. Albon still outscored him in Monza, still outscored him in Singapore. Yeah, they were close. But just because he did a cheeky pass on the first lap of a race that Albon ended up DNFing doesn't mean we say, oh, Albon's about to be challenged by his teammate. I don't know. He could easily go backwards. Yuki Tsunoda did. Yuki Tsunoda started strong, went backwards. Zhou Guanyu started strong, went backwards. Liam Lawson started strong, went backwards. That's a whole other discussion. Don't want to talk about Bearman, but I guess I have to because Sean brought him up and said, Sean at least brought up some good points that the Haas engineers told him to speed up. You don't have to slow down the car as much. And in the end, he was still 13th. And if his instinct is not to drive the car fast, but it's to worry about tire degradation in your F1 opportunity, it's pretty pathetic. If you ask me, like when you put Bearman in context in any sort of way, like as I talk this out, I go, I'm trying to praise this kid, but it's like, wow, when I put it in context, it's pretty pathetic. Yeah, maybe there is more to him, but we'll see. There was an interview, I think it was FP1 Will, earlier this year where they talked about, or actually might have been the race again. They talk about how Io Komatsu had to say, don't worry about Oliver Bearman's FP1 times. We're not too worried about his time sheets, about his position in F2. He just gives good feedback to the engineers. And they made a comparison that Charles Leclerc's FP outings in 2016, 2017 weren't anything special, that Haas really kind of gave up on him because of it. They said they didn't want him. And he said, we can't look at it like that because he gives good feedback to the engineers. I just like to point out that so you're saying the last guy who had poor FP1 outings became Charles Leclerc? That's not a superstar, everybody. If that's your ultimate trajectory to Bearman, that's not a superstar. But Bearman has come into every opportunity and been very abundantly average, like 13th in that Haas in Baku. 13th. He gets 10th by a double DNF and then passing his teammate under what should have been a safety car. Yes, Hulkenberg was kind of, who also likes to drive slow at any point in time he can, should have paid more attention. But if that's how you have to get a solitary point in a bad car, that's pretty pathetic. Let's just always put Bearman into context, everybody. Don't just get caught up in the hype. Just look at what actually happened. And you'll go, okay. All I want to say is this kid is an average driver. I don't even really want to talk about him. It's just the fact that he's worshipped at every chance he gets. They said, he's scored points in 2 different cars in his first 2 appearances. The first one was in a race-winning Ferrari, where he came 7th. Barely. Needed, like I've pointed out before, a fuck-up from McLaren and Mercedes in strategy. Qualified 11th, 3/10 behind Hamilton, and the F1 media, Kroon Chendak, he's only 3/10 behind Lewis Hamilton. Yeah, that car in Australia with Carlos Sainz was half a second faster than Lewis Hamilton a lap. Carlos Sainz isn't the standard bearer of world champion. Carlos Sainz is an average driver. So Oliver Bearman is below the average driver that is Carlos Sainz. Let's relax. Yes, maybe he has potential. Maybe he has a future. Stop overvaluing what you see just because you want another British driver on the grid. And that's what it is. You can't convince me otherwise, because why would they worship someone who's doing mediocre things? Do you want another Nico Hülkenberg on the grid? Anyway, poor Nico. He's funny enough, he's the only one who has a good take on Oliver Bearman. He's probably pissed that Oliver passed him under that what should have been a yellow flag. And he's the only one who critiqued him after Saudi Arabia. Said, yeah, well, you got to keep it up. You can't just be pushed into oblivion. You can't just do one good race in a good Ferrari. Like Bearman saying, oh, Hülkenberg's so slow. Hülkenberg shot back and said, yeah, I'm in the tertiary version of your car. At the beginning of the season, we thought the Sauber was going to be better than the Haas. I'm in the third version. There's the Ferrari, then there's the Sauber Ferrari, and then there's us. You're 2 deviations ahead of me. And you're saying I'm slow? You should be faster than me. Otherwise, you don't belong here. It's funny that, like, the only one who I seem to agree on with this is Nico. Like, the only one I can defer to is Nico, who's had a career of being abundantly average and being talked up by the media for no reason. I see the signs. I don't want it to happen again. I'm gonna talk it down as much as I can with as much influence as I can. The last thing we need is another Nico Hülkenberg. Anyway, the only other thing I want to talk about today is Daniel Ricciardo, and Sean and I go into it in the last philosophy episode. It's a shame. I had this whole thing written out. This whole eulogy for him, like I was saying, don't do it, Red Bull. Give Sergio Perez a break. Give Danny a shot in the Red Bull. Like I said earlier, having low expectations and someone exceed them is not better than someone having high expectations and someone miss them. Because more than likely, if you look at it, like it's the old saying, shoot for the moon, because if you miss, you're still amongst the stars. Danny is a star. Danny still has a lot of potential. Danny is still better than most of the drivers on the grid. And I would say at least the back half in the right car. For some reason, that V-carb, the AlphaTauri, didn't seem to suit him that well. But to me, on any given day, he's still better than Magnussen, Hülkenberg, Stroll, definitely. Sometimes Albon, Colapinto, Bottas whenever Valtteri feels like it, Bottas could be better, but whenever Valtteri doesn't feel like it, Danny's definitely better. Zhou. I still think he's better than Tsunoda because the best results have come from Danny, like a 4th in the sprint race. Tsunoda's got nowhere near that. Danny also did the 7th in Mexico last year. And that would have been a lot higher, too, if there wasn't a random safety car out of nowhere. Danny got a little unlucky, actually, to finish 7th there. He probably would have finished in the top 5. He was way ahead, had a pit stop between 6th. I think he had already done his stop. He could have nurtured his tires to the end. Top 5, top 6, maybe even a 4th if he got lucky. He was unfortunate. And I think, like I said, some of the best results have been him. Some of the flashes of brilliance have been him. Some of the best qualifying sessions have been him. Yuki probably has more potential because he's younger. They definitely see him as more consistent, and all that is true. And he's proven that he is better, at least points-wise, points getting, than Daniel this year. But it's a shame because it just never seemed to happen. It just never seemed to come together. And Liam Lawson could be good, but he could also very well be a case of hype. Red Bull just don't seem to have that much faith in him. They probably could have pulled this trigger at the summer break, but they've been waffling, and now they had to wait for the deadline to happen on this contract just to try and keep him and maybe prove to him that he's not good enough. This seems to be like a bluff. They're saying, okay, yeah, Liam, you think you belong in Formula One? Your management, yeah, you think you deserve to be here? Go show it. Because if you don't, you're done. That's not really fair to him either. But the person you don't play politics with is Danny. And I can't help but feel that Danny would have been the driver that Sauber would have revolved its project around had they not done the stupid thing of signing Nico Hülkenberg, which is seeming more and more stupider by the day. You're gonna get a 37-year-old in charge of development and experience and growth in the hopes that one day you can be a championship team when that 37-year-old has never done it. That 37-year-old has never amounted to anything. When he complains about cars, when all of his peers had the same cars and got podiums, even some wins. He's had the car, everybody. I keep seeing in the comments every time he, like in Singapore qualifying, he qualifies 6th, and they go, give that man a car. He's doing this in a tractor. He's had the car. And just because somebody qualifies well doesn't mean anything. And I bring it up because the last point I want to make about Danny is, like I said in the philosophy, I can't help but feel that if he stayed out of Formula One and let the mystique build, just like Hülkenberg did, let the chatter and the talk say, oh, Danny can do it. Oh, Danny's rumored to go here. Danny's rumored to go there, and don't sign anywhere. And just keep this aura around you getting higher and higher so that one day you can just jump into the right position and take that opportunity. I think that would have been better than to just grab the first straw that came at you. You should have probably said, I don't want to replace Nick de Vries after only 10 races. This car doesn't seem that good. You should have thought about it. Why Red Bull were so keen to get rid of Nick before the season was already done, it makes no sense to me. You might have seen a great performance out of de Vries. And if it still wasn't good enough, it still wasn't what you thought it would be, you could have still gotten rid of him at the end of the year. And then Danny comes in fresh, a year off, all of his bad habits gone. He doesn't break his hand, which I think was the ultimate catalyst for his downfall, like I said. And he comes back stronger. And we don't lose an 8-time race winner, one of the most decorated drivers on the grid, for some arrogant little prick who thinks he deserves everything. And Liam Lawson, he, like the way he said on Drive to Survive, like, why shouldn't I have that seat over Yuki Tsunoda? Because you haven't done anything that special, Liam. You came 10th in Singapore. The rest of your performances were meh. 11th, okay, cool. 13th. Qatar, you crashed out in the sprint race. 16th in that race. Like, you were getting worse. And Sean and I pointed out, yeah, Super Formula, you come in flying. Win the first race in Super Formula. What happened to you the rest of the year? Nothing that we even know about. Nothing that to write home about. What was your F2 career? You didn't win it. You weren't the best amongst your peers. You need to really be a little bit more humble, I would think. And why your management's pushing you to be in F1 as if you're some sort of future star, it's just odd. It's just odd, especially at the expense of Daniel Ricciardo and not Yuki Tsunoda and Sergio Perez. Those are disposable drivers. You don't have the faith in Yuki to take over the Red Bull? Okay, get rid of him. You did have the faith in Danny. You were grooming him to be that. But then last second you got cold feet, and because you already signed Tsunoda, you just dump him? Didn't even give him the chance to retire properly? It's odd. It's odd, especially for someone like Liam, who's not a future champion. Maybe he will be. Maybe I'll eat my words one day, but definitely don't see it. Anyways, that's my take on the things I missed. If you don't like it, you can leave a mean, nasty comment saying how I look like a total loser, saying how I record these episodes in my underwear on a random bed with stuffed animals. And all of those things will be true. But hey, I'm the one with the microphone. I'm the one in the arena. I'm the one putting my reputation on the line. What are you doing? Listening to some weirdo from Southern Ontario give his take on Formula One. That's who you are. See, Liam Lawson, see how arrogant that sounds? I need to be more humble. I love everyone listening to this podcast. I really do. Thank you. And every support, every comment you make, even if it's critical, I want to hear it. I want to get better. I want to provide more content. I love doing this. So to everybody who supports us even now, at the foundation building point of this podcast, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for letting me do this and be on vacation and still come back and comment on it. And great job, Sean. If you're listening to this, you did an amazing job while I was gone. I need to step up to your level now. F1 Philosophy at YouTube. F1_philosophy at Instagram. And F1philosophypod at gmail.com. This has been another episode of Nick's News. We'll come back with some more philosophy during this autumn break in a bit. Good night, everybody.